back in January of 2020, despite increasingly isolating myself due to the PTSD and letting friendships kind of fall by the wayside over the years, I had a wife and I had another couple who were my closest friends, who were like family to me, and those three people were the people that I played board games with as well. In February, after my wife left me, those two friends also decided to cease contact in a show of solidarity with her, and the number of adult gamers I had in my life went down to 0. So I have not played a game with anybody other than my two young boys since January or February of 2020. Of course, that also happened to be when COVID was ramping up and making it impossible to go out and meet new people. So that's why in the past several months, I've only played games with my kids and not with any adults. And it's gotten me thinking, when we eventually return to a world where we can hang out with each other again, am I going to go out and seek gamers to play with? You would think that would be an easy answer. Yes, of course, that's something I should do. But with my PTSD, it's awfully hard to, I guess, meet new people and hang out with new people. And I've definitely had very mixed results with gamers over the years, playing at conventions or board game meetups or wherever. I've met some really wonderful people, and I've met the opposite of that in the process too. And so I'm not super comfortable with the thought of having to go out and meet new gamers. This in turn led me to think about, well, what kind of people would I want to meet to game with? What qualities would I be looking for in a potential gaming partner? Speaking as if it's some kind of relationship, which I suppose it is in a way. And then along comes the Dice Tower, and they do a whole top 10 video on that very question of what qualities do you look for in a gamer, making it look like I'm just copying them. But this has been on my mind for quite some time. So despite what the Dice Tower may or may not have recently done, I'm going to do my top 10 qualities that I love in a gaming opponent. These are listed in order of number 10 being the least important to number 1 being the most important for me, although they all carry a certain amount of importance. So starting in at number 10 here is the least important thing, and that is I love people who are open to house rules. I am personally somebody who, when I acquire a new game, I'll go on Board Game Geek and I'll go to the variants forums for that game, and I'll look up variants that people have come up with that they feel have improved the game for them. And after sort of going over the rules myself and perhaps playing a game or two, I might think about what other people have suggested and think about how it might fit in with the overall feel of the game for me. And I'm certainly somebody who doesn't hesitate to introduce little house rules in my own games if I think that they do really improve the gameplay experience for me. My former gaming friends were very much open to the idea of maximizing our own enjoyment of the game, even if it wasn't 100% by the rules. And I know that there are gamers who are really weird about the whole idea of not playing exactly by what is written in the rule book, and I know it can be an irritant for some people. And I'm certainly not suggesting that as soon as I get a game I just make up all my own rules for it, but it is something that I like to explore. It gives me an opportunity to dig more into the design of the game itself too, which is pretty fun. So that was my number 10. So while my number 10 there was related to the game's design, my number 9 is related to the game's theme. And my number 9 then is I love people who are empathetic towards the historical or cultural setting or peoples that are presented within the game, particularly those that have some kind of a historical or cultural setting. I really appreciate thoughtful people who don't just gloss over serious things like slavery or colonialism or stuff like that, but who do think about that even with their entertainment, which I know is, again, an area where people can get really quite irritated. There are certainly people who don't want to be thinking about wider human issues when they're just trying to play a game and have a bit of fun. And I get that viewpoint. That makes sense that they might not want to do that. But personally, I do appreciate people who take the time to consider those things. So that was my number 9. With my number 8, we're going to talk about the gameplay. And my number 8 then is a player who does not get frozen up with AP or analysis paralysis on a regular basis. I don't want to be playing against one of these players who has to think and analyze every little aspect of the game and how exactly their turns are going to affect all of the various variables, and while I'm just sitting there kind of waiting for them to finish doing their thing so that I can get back to my turn again. And for me, I think that AP is a little bit indicative of somebody who cares a little bit too much about winning, perhaps. Maybe they put too much stake in being the best player, or maybe it's simply a matter of being worried about how others will perceive them if they don't perform well in the game. Maybe they feel like they need to do as good as possible for the sake of how others will look at them. But whatever the case may be, it's something that can be frustrating for other players at the table, to be waiting on people who take an excessive amount of time. Now, I'm sympathetic to it to a certain extent. There are games that really set off my AP. I mean, I remember way back when I was playing Dungeon Twister, that was one game where the sheer amount of options would just hurt my head. There are games like Scrabble, word games in particular, if I'm holding a hand of letters, just trying to come up with the best word I possibly can tends to freeze me up. Or even things like chess, or those no luck games where all the information is right there in front of you. I certainly have some issues with AP with certain games, but I do try to be more considerate of other players at the table and not worry too much about how well I do in the game itself. So that's why that's my number 8. My number 7 also relates to gameplay, and this is somebody who is okay with do-overs or redos. And it's just all about the atmosphere of the game. It's about creating just a relaxed atmosphere where players can feel like that they're enjoying themselves and doing the best they can. I know that there have been plenty of times in games where I've completed my turn, the next player started their turn, and I've gone, oh, I'm so dumb. I had this thing that I was supposed to do this turn that I totally forgot about. And I might say, do you mind if I just do that I meant to do but forgot? And so somebody who is okay with that sort of thing. And obviously I'm not talking about going back and redoing entire turns, or, you know, seeing some missed potential and going, oh wait, I have to rethink everything again. I'm just talking about all those little things you tend to forget in games as the gameplay progresses. Just going, oh right, I forgot I was supposed to bump this up this turn, or whatever it happens to be. Somebody who's just relaxed and says, no problem, to go ahead and do what you wanted to do there. And by the same token, I certainly don't mind other people going, oh, you know, that really wasn't the smartest move I could have made. I really want to maybe redo that. And I'll be like, no problem, go ahead and do what you wanted to do, and have the most fun you possibly can with this game, because it just doesn't matter that much, you know. And so that's why that's at number 7. My number 6 quality that I look for is somebody who cares about their opponents outside of the game. I've had so many experiences where even when I was playing with a friend's little game group, where we were playing with basically the same people week after week, where some members of that particular group would just not care about you at all outside of the game. For them, you were just basically a butt in a chair filling a role that was necessary for them to play the game. And beyond that, they just couldn't be bothered to talk to you or whatever. So there's certainly plenty of times where I've experienced as gamers like this who just want that position to be filled so that they can play their game. But I would rather play with somebody who can walk that fine tightrope between paying attention to the game and maybe just a bit of light chit chat on the side, or particularly before or after the game, just sort of catching up on each other's lives. Somebody who is invested in me and the other players, and who's not just there to play games, but who's actually there to socialize. Because for me, that's one of the great things about board gaming, is it does bring a group of people around a table, facing each other, talking to each other, interacting in person with each other rather than through social media or computer or whatever else. And it puts us in a position where we can relate to each other, and that's important to me in a gaming opponent. So that's why it's my number 6. Number 5 gets back to gameplay again, and for my number 5 quality is I want somebody who plays for the best position but has fun regardless of their finishing position. And I almost put that as somebody who plays to win but is happy even if they don't win. But then I realized I could squeeze in another point there where it can be easy, where towards the end of a game, it might be pretty obvious that you're not going to win. So how do you react to that? You know, some people might try to actively sabotage the game because they can't win, or they might just straight up give up, say it doesn't really matter, semi-randomly move pieces around just to play out the game. But I appreciate somebody who's in it to the end, who is fighting for the best position, even if they're in last place. Maybe they're fighting to come in second last instead of last. And that way they're playing to the best they possibly can for themselves throughout the course of the game, and they're not giving up if things are going badly for them. And sort of tying hand in hand with that is somebody who is not a whiner. I've also played with gamers where if it's an interactive game, whether it's an Ameritrash style beat each other up type of thing, or just an interactive Euro type of game, players who, when somebody does something that is disadvantageous to them, will just start complaining and whining and saying, I'm not winning here, why are you going after me, and going on. And it gets irritating because you got to choose somebody in those types of games to go after. So I would rather that person, maybe if they want to, make a case for why they should go after somebody else, but then leave it at that. If the player decides to still go after them, say, okay, that's how the game plays. This is also why I'm so terrible at negotiation games, because I'm just not interested in telling other players what to do. If they want to attack me, they want to attack me. It sucks for me, but hey, that's the game, right? So I'm just so uninterested in trying to convince people to do what they don't want to do. And that's why that type of game player is at my number 5. Number 4 here really encompasses my personal approach to board gaming. So for me, a big reason why I love board games is because they allow me to create a shared narrative with other people around the table. And that's a big part of why theme is so important to me, because if I can't create some kind of narrative, even if it doesn't have to be like a storytelling game where you're making up an actual story, but the fact that things happen and develop in the game, they create a story within themselves, and they kind of take me away from whatever's going on in my life right now, which frankly I don't even know what to say about the past several months, but they allow me to engage in a new story that is being played out and over which the players have direct control. And so my number 4 is somebody who enjoys creating a shared narrative. And so what that means from a gameplay perspective is it means that the player is engaged even when it's another player's turn. And on their own turn, they're kind of narrating what they're doing so that other players can follow along and see what they're doing. One thing that a lot of gamers seem to like that I really dislike are games that have maybe phases of a turn where simultaneous action can happen, where maybe there's an aspect of the turn that doesn't involve interaction with other players, so all players can do their own thing. They can maybe all collect their resources or whatever it happens to be. that they all do simultaneously so that the game can move along quicker. I can't stand that kind of simultaneous play because I do want to see what other players are doing. I'm very interested in the strategies and tactics that are being employed by other players and seeing how that works out for them in the game. And so even when games have these kind of simultaneous actions, I tend to ask other players, can we just do this in turn order so we can follow along with what players are doing? And that all helps to create this shared narrative experience that we're all enjoying together. And that's my number 4, which means we're into the top 3 most important qualities in a gamer. And yes, this is as high as number 3, but this is somebody who sits around the game table and I never see their phone. Please, no cell phones. I grew up without cell phones. I was very late to get into this cell phone ownership thing, and I still don't necessarily love having a way that people can get hold of me all the time, anytime. But when it comes time to socialize and be together, I don't want to see anyone's phone. Of course, this ties in very closely to the previous point of being engaged and involved with everybody's turns and creating that experience together. Yes, I'm in my mid-40s, and yes, I'm grumpy about technology and social media, which I don't even participate in at all either. But I still don't think it's too much to ask people to leave their phones away when they're socializing. Maybe it is nowadays, but I'm still going to ask it anyhow. And then we're at number 2, and these are sort of a list of qualities that all kind of relate together. And so this is somebody who has a sense of humor or a sense of fun or positivity. So it's just this overall feeling of, I'm happy to be here and I'm just here to have some fun. Why so serious, bro? We're here to play games. And even when the game is going terribly, when nothing's going right, all the plans are falling apart, we're still playing a game with each other, which is amazing. And so I want that sense of positivity and that sense of humor, somebody who can laugh at the poor luck maybe that happens and who doesn't get grumpy and whiny like I mentioned earlier. This is an area where maybe I can improve when it comes to social situations with the health problems that I deal with. Fatigue is a huge problem for me, so it can be hard for me to keep that positive energy up even when I am enjoying myself. So it is something that I could maybe work on for myself. But number 1 is also a personal trait, personal quality, and this is kind of the most important thing in a person for me personally, and that is both kindness and patience. If I had to summarize my entire personal philosophy in a single word, it would be kindness. Let's be kind to each other. If we're playing a complex game, let's say, and I'm struggling to grasp what's going on and maybe having to ask a lot of questions, I want a patient person next to me who's going to help me through it and who takes a kind approach to my confusion. And then this kindness is a trait that would hopefully allow the person to play with anybody else who happens to be around the table, of any gender, any sexual orientation, any race, whatever it may be, that regardless of who is around them on the table, that they are kind to that person. And that completes the full top 10. When I sort of was looking over it, I realized what I basically want is a slightly more positive version of myself. How can I find basically a few other versions of me that I can play with? And so if you've heard this list and we're like, oh my gosh, that's me, you're describing me. And guess what? I also happen to live in the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph area of Ontario. Definitely hit me up. Let me know that you're here and are ready to play some games. And hopefully I can be the type of opponent that is a joy for you to play with as well. But what traits or qualities did I miss out on? Let me know in the comments what other things that you might look for in a potential gaming opponent. I'm very curious to hear what you prioritize in terms of the people that you play games with. Please let me know in the comments. The preceding video has been brought to you free of charge by me, Josh. The only thing I ask in return is that you could do one of the following. Give me a thumb up, push the subscribe button, or share the link to this video with somebody who you think would enjoy it. Cheers. Dude, that's what I thought I was just doing. When I acquire new... I have had friends, but I really appreciate thoughtful people who... I just said that and I can't figure out where to go from there. At number 4 encompasses, and so in that aspect,